As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study Exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, sir.
Hi. Yeah. Hello, good evening, and compliments
Yes,
of the
sir. We welcome our audience to another segment of ICAN on Air. And today we'll be talking about crude oil and how the revenue can be improved. And we are having with us Mr. Ayo Akinduiche, who will be doing justice to this program and the question we're having tonight. Also, this is to let our audience know that if you have your question for our guests, please don't forget to bring it on. And also, when you join us, we want you to state your name and where you are calling us from. It promises to be another exciting one. You will surely benefit. Once again, Mr. Ayo, good evening for coming on ICAN on here this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. To start with, talking about crude oil, how it can be improved and the revenue can be improved. Can you give us a little insight, the background to the concept of crude oil being improved and generating a better revenue? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very beautiful way to start off the conversation. As we're aware, Nigeria is a major producer, oil producer in that sector, and of course, that's a mainstay of our economy. On the average, the foreign earning capacity of Nigeria, oil and gas contributes about 90%. So that's quite substantial. And there are two components from a revenue point of view as accountants, two components that are really of interest to us. One is the price of the product. Two is the volume that is produced. And of course, revenue is derived from those two components. So to improve your revenue, if you're able to increase your price or increase your the volume that is produced, then you are very much in line with attaining your improved revenue target. And of course, oil being a global product, the price is out of the control of Nigeria. So it's determined at the global markets based on the forces of demand and supply. And of course, based on recent developments we've seen in Eastern Europe with Ukraine and Russian war. So there could be other geopolitical issues that could have significant impact on oil price. So the second component, which is the volume produced, is one that you have some level of control because you could, based on how well you manage your production profile, based on how well you manage your ability to attract the right level of investment, via incentives, fiscal provisions, conducive operating environment, and all that, then you can, over time, grow your production, in the right direction. So those two factors, price and volume produced, are two key elements that determine what revenue you derive. And based on some geopolitical development in recent past, we've seen oil price at very high, over at some point over $100 per barrel. I think currently it's somewhere around $80 per barrel or thereabout. But however, despite these very vibrant and what I'll consider as very healthy oil price, Nigeria has not been able to fully take advantage of these opportunities because we've struggled with our ability to produce. Over time, on the average, Nigeria produced about 2 million barrels per day. At some point, it was slightly higher, maybe about 2.2 million barrels. But as of September this year, we're producing less than 1 million barrels. In fact, I think as of September 2022, the average production per day was quoted as 937 barrels per day by NMPC. Yeah, so maybe just to provide that background.
Thank you very much. A great insight there you've given us. Going ahead, another question I want to put up, sir, is that in Nigeria today, crude oil is being viewed from different angles, depending on who you are talking to. Why some see it as a blessing, as a source of revenue to Nigeria. Some other people see it as an economic curse to Nigeria. Of course, people will tell you that we have monoproduct economy. If not for crude oil, if crude oil never came into being, probably would have done better. Now, having you with us this evening, and of course, being the last week of the year 2022, will you help us to have a better view of this so-called crude oil? In simple terms, what I mean is that please educate our viewers across the globe. What is crude oil? And what are the types of crude oil out there? Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Crude oil is made from, it's hydrocarbon. So for those that are vast in sciences, that's a combination of carbon and hydrogen and some complex compound and made from decomposing organic products. Explorationists will tell us that it takes billions of years, so and it's not a renewable, is a depleting asset. That means as you produce the oil that you have, you are not able to replace it as quickly as you produce it. So over time, it's going to you're going to fully utilize it. So it's going to finish. So and whether it's a cause or it's is a function of how well you utilize it. We've seen other countries that have oil and that they've been able to utilize the revenue from oil. A very good example is the country that just hosted the World Cup in 2022, Qatar. So we could see what they were able to achieve. A relatively small country, but hosted a very beautiful tournament. Saudi Arabia is another country, probably one of the a country that has probably one of the most capitalized oil and gas, national oil and gas company in Saudi Aramco. But for us in Africa and Nigeria, not only Nigeria, I think we seem to have performed suboptimally, in terms of what we've been able to achieve, with the revenue we derive from crude oil. But to look at oil reserves globally, the country that has the highest oil reserve controls about 18% of the global reserve is Venezuela. And of course, many of us are aware that at the moment, the economy of Venezuela is not in a very good state. So that gave us, and if we look at those data, Nigeria is the 10th largest in the world and holds about 2% of global oil reserves, based on which comes to about 37 billion or so. So it's not so much about the revenue you make, but it's more about what are you able to do with the revenue that you've realized. And it's not true that Nigeria is a mono product economy. Before oil, we have agriculture, playing very important role. We have other mineral deposits. At some point we have capacity for production. Where we have lots and lots of factories, in Nigeria, but over time we seem not to have managed the affairs well. So that's why it seems as if at the moment the mainstay of the Nigerian economy is now down to oil, due to a number of factors. Agriculture, even though still employs the largest number of people, contributes the most to GDP, but in terms of revenue, contributes very little to revenue generation. Yeah. So from that point of view, I tend to disagree that oil is not a curse, but rather we seem to have mismanaged our oil revenue and generally the oil industry as a whole. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. So it is not the oil per se that is the issue, but how we've gone about handling it and the money that came through, what we have done with the money over time. Thank you very much, sir. Another question there is that We want you to give us an idea of Nigeria's crude oil endowment. Lately we just told that oil has been discovered in the north. Let's say before now, what did you hear me, sir?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. I think I missed that.
You missed that. I was saying that you should give us an idea of Nigeria's crude oil endowment. And I was making allusion to the fact that we have just been told that oil has been discovered in a large quantity in the north. As it stands now, what is Nigeria's crude oil endowment and its global ranking or position in relation to other crude oil bearing nations?
Okay, I think interesting question, and that's really a very positive development. So the more oil we're able to discover, that then improves the reserves capability of Nigeria. Of course, you can only produce the reserves that you have. So for me, I think it's a very positive development, and a good reward, for the many years of hard work that's gone into exploration in the northern part, particularly in the Chad Basin. So I think Gombe and Bauchi, in between those two states, there were reports that there is oil in commercial quantity. But at the moment, like I said earlier, the total proved reserves. So you may have reserves, but reserves that are not yet proved. The proved reserve is the one that you've done some study to be able to assess to a reasonable estimate, to a reasonable extent, the volume that you have in place, and that you are able to, and that the volume is commercial, and you have the right level of technology to be able to produce it. So what we have at the moment is in the region of about 37, at least less than 40 billion barrels have been discovered in Nigeria. And in terms of our position globally, Nigeria is 10th in the world. I did mention earlier that the country with the highest reserves is Venezuela. That has about 18%,
Yes.
almost about 300 billion barrels, followed by Saudi Arabia with about 270 barrels, and Canada with about 170 barrels. And Nigeria is not even does not have the highest reserve in Africa. Libya has about 48 billion barrels, has the highest reserves in Africa. So in a way, I think there are probably scope, the opportunities for Nigeria, to be able to improve its proved reserves. And of course, that will be a function of the kind of investment that goes into exploration. As you are very much aware, PIA was passed in 2021. And before then, for a couple of years, because of uncertainty around, the legal framework that governs the industry, there have been very limited investment flow. And of course, that impacts what goes into exploration.
Thank you. Going further, based on your wealth of knowledge and experience of the oil industry, please, can you enlighten us further? Are there properties or qualities that make the Nigerian crude oil different from the crude oil of other nations? Or do the properties have any relevance in how the crude oil will be priced or sold?
Okay, another interesting question again. The Nigerian crude is considered. Hello, can you hear me, please?
I can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, excellent. So the Nigerian crude, there are different forms of classification, but two major classification is oil that is considered heavy and oil that is considered light. Light crude are typically those crude that are easy to refine. So the technology that is required for such refining is not so complicated, you know, and we have you know, some of those not particularly complicated refineries in Nigeria that do some level of small scale refining, maybe between 1 and 10,000 barrels a day, also often referred to as modular refineries. But for every crude, you require more complicated process. And of course, if the refining process is complicated, that means it's going to cost you more money to refine. So typically, people are willing to pay more for light crude. Um, so in most cases, Nigerian crude, often referred to as Bonny Light, is command relatively higher price in the international market compared to other countries that produce every crude. Then also in terms of the content of impurities you have in the crude, things like sulfur, you know, so you could then grade the crude into sweet and sour. So Nigerian crude is considered to be sweet because it has very minimal level of impurity. And of course, as a result of that, that also contributes to easier refining process. So less complicated refining technology that is required. Of course, that has impact on the cost in terms of refining, and that then commands higher price. So in a way, the Bonny Lights from Nigeria tend to command better price per barrel at the international market. And of course, that should have an impact also on our revenue and you know, basically the bottom line for Nigeria.
Thank you very much, sir. One of our audience, John Bassi, is asking a question. He says, is there any area you can say OPEC has helped us in the management of our revenue, of our reserves?
OPEC is more around control of you know, the supply side of the market. You know, there are two sides. Global oil and gas market. You know, you have the producers and then you have the consuming countries. So what OPEC has done is to try to manage the supply side in terms of the volume of crude oil that is available in the global market. Of course, you know, like the forces of demand and supply, if the supply is higher, that tends to force price to go down so that you then have a level of equilibrium. You know, so but of course, as producers, you know, you want oil price to be high. You know, so OPEC will come in from time to time to intervene in the supply side, sometimes enforcing some level of quota of production. For example, at the moment in Nigeria, the Nigerian quota is about 1.8 million per barrel, saying Nigeria don't produce more than 1.8 million barrels. So we don't want oversupply because when there is oversupply, then you have, you know, fewer people who are making effective demand for crude oil, and then eventually that will result in reduction in the price of crude. So it's more on the side of you know, supporting you know, the supply side of the global market. So directly, OPEC may not have an impact on your reserves, you know, but we talked about exploration earlier, right? Because that's what helps you to know what exactly you have. And because exploration is capital intensive, so if you earn more revenue from what you are producing, then there's every likelihood that your economy will be healthy, and you can provide the required investment, even as government, you know, to do some form of exploration work and increase your reserves. So in a way, that's the way I see you know, the connection between OPEC and the reserves.
Individual reserve. Thank you very much, John Bassi. I hope that's satisfying. It answers your question. Before asking you another question from my end, I will want to take on Fagbola Tebitokpe's question. Fagbola, you are welcome to the show once again. He says, what is the impact of oil on the improved oil production and sales?
Okay, so I guess Mr. Gbafagbola is referring to oil price volatility, right? So, like I
I
said at
guess
the
so
beginning,
too.
yeah, oil price is not because it's a global product, so it's not determined. Nigeria has little or no control, maybe except by intervention of OPEC that may now say, okay, let's moderate the supply or the production of oil. And in recent times, we've seen some huge swing, in terms of volatility, right? Over the last 2 years, we've seen oil price move from an average of about $23 to about $120 or so. So that
Mm.
shows how quickly prices can move up and or come down. And we did mention at the beginning that there are two critical factors that can impact revenue of an oil producing country: the price at which you're able to sell what you produce and the quantity of what you produce. So really, the volatility of oil could have significant impact on the revenue that accrue from crude oil production, and that could have very significant impact on the health of the economy as a whole. Over time, we've seen that there seems to be some level of correlation between oil price and the performance of the Nigerian economy. So when oil price is high, most times those are the periods where we have very healthy GDP growth in Nigeria, sometimes above 5%. And the period where you have oil price very low, sub $30 per barrel, those are usually the period where Nigeria tend to struggle a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes even going into recession. But of course, this recent healthy and very good oil price, Nigeria seems to have missed out of that. So that did not follow the correlation I just described. Why? Because two major reasons. One is from the side of production. We have some form of constrained production, largely due to crude oil theft, lack of investment over a long period of time because of the delay in passage of the PIA, security issues, and that's impacted our ability to produce. So, like I said, our production dropped from about over 2 million barrels to less than 1 million. So at that point, when oil price was high, Nigeria could not fully take advantage, when oil price was over $100 per barrel. Then the second factor that has also not allowed Nigeria to benefit from these windfall, so to say, is on the spending side. We've been spending significant amount of our revenue to subsidize petroleum products, particularly PMS. And of course that's been a huge drain. So what could have gone to as revenue to help improve the health and save for the rainy day, of course, when oil price might dive and go down, has been wasted, on subsidy, basically spent and with little or no value for it.
I think, Fagbola, our guest has been able to do justice to your question. For those who are just joining us, we say you're welcome to ICAN on Air. And this evening, we are guesting Mr. Ayo, who has been really doing justice to the issue of crude oil production. Shosanolu Olatunji also has a question. And I think it is good we are giving our audience the priority so that their doubts can be cleared and they can show up their knowledge. He says, sir, how best can we effectively utilize our oil and non-oil revenue in line with the global best practices in order to enhance our per capita income? What do you have to say to that, sir?
No, I think that's that's something in recent times we've seen how wasteful we've been as a country. So and as accountants, we're trained to look at how can we optimize the resources that we have, either in our personal finances or in corporate world, where you work for companies, and also at a national level as a country. So one of the areas we need to focus on is first, we don't we can't afford to spend everything that we earn. We should learn to save. Why? Because at a point during this conversation, we did mention that Nigeria is a mono economy product. So if oil prices, if it goes up, we earn a lot of revenue, and at a point, it's likely to come down. That's just the reality of life. When it goes down, do you have the buffer? Do you have the shock absorber to be able to take you through the period when it is down, so that the shortfall in your revenue, then you can leverage on your savings, to go through those difficult moments, and then when things goes up again, then that helps in a way. Two is in terms of waste. We're a very wasteful country. I was listening to the news earlier today, and someone made reference to the new terminal that we built. And the terminal, of course, we borrowed to build that terminal, but now we're not able to put it to use because of some technical flaws. And of course, if you look around, you see many a times we'll make an attempt to build infrastructure or to make investments. For example, landmark investment like Ajaokuta, where we have poured in a lot of petrodollars. But unfortunately, we have not been able to get value out of it. You have the Lagos-Ibadan rail. At the moment, I understand many a times you still have to buy tickets in cash. That's clearly not consistent with the cashless policy of the CBN. So these are so even when you produce assets, we're not fully sweating the assets to then improve our non-oil revenue, associated. So you could have used oil money to build the asset, then that can then help to show up your non-oil revenue. So two things. First, we need to learn to save for the rainy day. And the second thing is we need to be more efficient with the way we spend our money. We are focused, in recent times, we've heard the Minister of Finance talk about we're having revenue challenge. Yeah, that might be true. But I think the bigger challenge is that we're not really very good with spending. So we also have a spending problem. We spend as if we're a rich country, but meanwhile, Nigeria is such a poor country. We're barely producing 1 million barrels of oil to be shared over 200 million people. Compared to some other economies that produce, they have the capacity to produce up to 10 million barrels, and they're just a handful of people to share that. So clearly, those are two areas. I think if we're able to focus on those two areas, cut down our cost of governance. You look at the lifestyle of our government officials. You just won't believe that they're in Nigeria. Drive very expensive cars, live in Porsche, and expensive houses. Of course, clearly, as a country, we can't afford that. We don't have the finances to live large like that.
Thank you. Those words are words on marbles. That is food for thought for everyone, wherever we are. How frugal, wasteful we are determines a lot. We'll get by. Fagbola, I'll be coming back to you. But before that, I have this question for our sir. Can you please run us through the key or the basic activities or processes that are involved in the successful production of crude oil? Since we are talking about crude oil production, can you use crude oil, especially in Nigeria?
Okay, crude oil could be divided into maybe about 5 phases. You start with exploration. So I think I've mentioned and discussed exploration very extensively. That's the process of checking and do we have oil in commercial quantities that if you put money into it, you produce and you can make money out of it. So that's the exploration phase, and that's usually the beginning. After getting the license, to then to explore and look for oil. So after you've successfully carried out exploration and you are successful and you are certain that yes, there is commercial discovery. Then you now do what's called appraiser. Appraiser is that point when you do a more detailed review, with development, at the back of your mind, that what's the most efficient way, to produce this oil. So appraiser phase basically then helps you to address, come up with an estimate of, okay, what's the volume that we have in place, what kind of technology do we need to have in place to be able to produce these and things like that. And of course, the next phase is then your development, because you require some infrastructure, to be able to produce the oil. So you need to drill your wells, you need to develop your surface infrastructure, your pipelines, and all that you then use to evacuate the oil. So of course, those three phases are the painful, difficult parts, because you're just spending money. Then then get to the phase of production, when it's then time for you to get the crude out, and then you can monetize it. So you can sell it, you can refine it, and then you then start earning some revenue. Of course, after a couple of years, like I said, crude oil is a depleting asset. So at a point, you may get to a point where it's no longer commercially viable for you to continue to produce. Then at that point, you then need to abandon the assets. So you have what is called abandonment and restoration phase. So best practice is that you don't just leave the facility and just disappear. You're supposed to do it in an environmentally friendly manner, where you're able to restore the environment to what it was, before you started your exploration process. So those are the 5 phases, really: exploration, appraisal, development, production. Then you then do abandonment and restoration.
Thank you very much, sir. Although there is a question closely knitted to the one you have just answered, but I will want us to go on a short break, and after that, we'll continue. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back from that short break. I did say that there is a question closely following the one our guest answered, and is talking about the steps that needs to be taken in order to improve and enhance Nigeria crude oil production. That is the question, sir. What are the steps that we need to take as a nation, or that can be taken as the expert in if you can take, so as to Nigeria's crude oil production? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think there's some that some maybe we could look at it from 2 main perspectives. One is from an technical and operational point of view. Then 2 is to then look at it from a point of view of our geopolitical risk level, as a country. So maybe I'll start off with a geopolitical risk level as a country. Many of us are very familiar with the story, that led to where we are as a country, where we dropped from producing about over 2 million barrels per day of oil to below 1 million barrels, and that's likely because we have some unscrupulous elements who are busy stealing, crude produced. And of course, as a country also, we've been struggling with the issue of insurgency, security, kidnapping, and all that. So, and of course, all these bring uncertainties, and uncertainties are not the best friend of investors. So if we're serious about increasing our ability to produce, and maybe at least at a minimum get back to where we had before, at least produce enough to meet OPEC quota of 1.8 million per barrels a day, then we need to address these issues. No investor will bring money into an environment where he's not sure that his investment will be preserved. And when he produces and is able to evacuate what he has produced, and of course monetize. So that's it from a geopolitical point of view. So the more operational or technical parts of things is, we could look at it from the point of view of funding. So most of the arrangements we have in Nigeria are majorly around joint venture arrangements, where government holds about 55 or 60% of the shareholdings, and in that arrangement, government requires each party is expected to pay its cash call. Feedback from some of the operators is that government seems to be struggling, to meet its cash call obligations. Of course, that's not totally surprising, knowing the economic circumstance where we find ourselves as a country. But it's quite irresponsible, really, if you don't pay your cash call, but when it's time to lift oil, you want to go to the terminal and claim that you have a share in the oil. So the right thing is for you to do your part, pay your cash call, so that there's money, to do all those kind of investment that is required. That will then give rise to, the oil, being able to produce, and then even do a lot more, and increasing your production capacity. But the good news is, NNPC, based on the provisions of the PIA, is now a limited, is not a private company. So that means it doesn't have to wait for government. So it could, if you have a good project, a project that will pass the screening of financiers, banks, and all that, they'll probably be able to provide those funding that's required. And then, hopefully that's an issue that we're able to address, and that can readily unlock value from an operational point of view. Then in terms of then creating the enabling environment, that is required for operators, to then be able to operate, the licensing arrangements, how quickly are we able to bring, the large acreage that we have that is currently not being explored, how can we bring them, and investors can come in, invest, and then, monetize these resources. Of course, many of us are aware of the discussions around energy transition, the drive for cleaner energy, and all that. So the dynamics might be quite different in the next 50 years. So it is appropriate for Nigeria to do whatever it takes, to address some of the hiccups, some of the bottlenecks that make it difficult for us to increase, our production, our ability to produce, and that these are some of the issues I think I've addressed, and hopefully if we resolve those issues, we can unlock a significant value in that space, and of course investment in the downstream sector also. So good that we have a number of licenses. I think Dangote refinery probably coming on stream. Projection was that they will come on stream in 2023, such that we're not just producing and exporting crude, but we can actually refine substantial parts of those of the crude that is produced.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope before we release you this evening on the issue of a cleaner green energy, we may have to help us to say one or two things on it. But before we get to that point, it is no news that Nigeria is equally blessed with huge natural gas reserve. Can you please educate our global audience on the volume of Nigeria's natural gas reserve and its contribution to the Nigerian economy? Let's delve a little into gas before we wrap it up. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Nigeria is considered a gas province. So even though we have oil, but we seem to have more gas than oil. Um, in fact, if you look at the global reserves, even though Nigeria was 10th, in the when we're looking at the reserves for oil, but for gas, Nigeria came 9th, with about 180 million billion scoff of gas reserves. Very on top of that list is Russia, followed by Iran, Qatar. So Nigeria is number 9 on that list. So we have significant gas reserves. But the challenge is we have not been able to appropriately commercialize and monetize our gas. Substantial part of our gas that is associated with oil, and the implication of that is that whenever you produce that oil, the gas will inadvertently come out. And but because we don't have the right infrastructure to fully monetize such gas, a lot of those are being flared at the moment with significant environmental impact. So at a minimum, as a country, I would expect that we brought the right level of investment to be able to fully commercialize all gas molecules that we produce in Nigeria, because it's clearly an irony, right? As you are aware, gas is a cleaner, even though it's fossil fuel, but it's considered to be much cleaner than oil, and is a major fuel for power. So a country like Nigeria, where we seems to be struggling with power, but at the same time, in one breath, we're then burning off the gas that we have. If not for anything, we should be able to monetize those gas molecules and use them for power generation. And of course, Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company, NLNG, a company where Nigeria owns about 49%. It's probably one of the best run manufacturing outfits in Nigeria, and it's been performing very well. So clearly there's no reason why we should not make further investment in liquefied natural gas. There's no reason why we should not drive the Decade of Gas initiative. That was an initiative put forward by the Ministry of Petroleum and Petroleum Resources, where incidentally the president happened to be the minister, in charge of that ministry. But how well are we driving that Decade of Gas? Because the general idea is that gas was meant to be the engine for Nigeria's industrialization, where we're able to set up many gas-powered, gas-intensive industries, in the petrochemical industry, in the fertilizer industry, that can use gas as a means to revolutionize and address the acute unemployment challenges that we have as a country. So clearly there's so much that can be done with gas. But unfortunately, we seem to have been playing lip service to that. We're not actively pursuing some of those very well crafted policy that we've put in place. I'm sure you probably heard at a point that Nigeria was going to use gas even to power motor vehicles, and we could not see that policy through. But rather, what are we doing? Importing PMS. We're spending a lot. It's projected that we'll probably spend another 6 trillion naira to subsidize fuel. But meanwhile, we have gas in abundance. So there's absolutely no reason why we should not be taking advantage of these natural endowments.
Thank you. Time is usually not our friend on this show. But before you go, considering dollars and spending more of you. Now, as an unbiased and objective Nigerian, can you give us your assessment of the Nigerian Petroleum Industry Act and Nigeria Finance Act vis-a-vis improved crude minute.
Okay, yeah, thank you. One of the beautiful things about some of these legal framework that you mentioned, the Petroleum Industry Act and the Finance Act, is that they're meant to bring clarity, and of course, when there's clarity, that reduces the uncertainty and risk, and that is potentially likely to encourage investment. Investors like such environment. So I think it's a positive thing. We have a PIA. It may not be perfect. Areas where we need further improvement, I'm sure the Finance Act will come and help to further improve and refine. But over and above just making these laws, there is need for us as a country to address some of those geopolitical issues. The level of insecurity is ridiculously high. There are issues that ordinarily should not happen at all, like the issue of crude theft. How could we explain the fact that happened for such a long time? So we should have mechanism in place to ensure that we run our country, properly, and then those investments will come in. Investor is not going to put his funds, either his local investor or international investor, into an environment where he's not guaranteed that he will be able to run his business efficiently and he'll be able to generate some decent returns at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. So we'll be coasting home. We cannot but talk. ICAN is always open to ideas to positively enhance the growth of our members, the accounting profession, and the Nigerian business environment at large. What is your advice or suggestion to ICAN and our members on additional contributions during discourse to this issue of improved crude oil production, especially in 2023 and beyond? What do you have to say to the Institute?
Well, I think the Institute occupies a very important place in the scheme of things. Is an institute that is a driver for efficiency and improvement and that continuous improvement mindset. We need to be able to bring this to bear, on the side of government, when government is putting together its policies and all that. The improved crude oil performance that we're seeing will not be sustained if we're not able to ensure that the issue of crude theft is resolved once and for all. Those that have committed this heinous crime against the country, we need to they need to be brought to book, and show examples, and that will serve as deterrent to others. PIA provides a unique opportunity for accountants. We have the host community trust fund. We require investment advisors. You require auditors. You require accountants to support this initiative. So that's an area where I expect ICAN can play a very important role. And I think the elephant in the room as a country is fuel subsidy. I expect that ICAN, leveraging on the experience that we have as professionals, we're able to make this available to government and provide, the right level of modeling, counsel, and advice. The perception, we have on government side is that, if we remove subsidy, that's going to create a lot of hardship. But already, it's as if there's no subsidy because most people are not buying fuel, at least, particularly outside maybe Lagos and Abuja. People are buying fuel at close to 200, 300 liters per liter, right? So so I expect ICAN to build the think tank to support the government, to think through the process, come up with policies that can alleviate the suffering of the people and take out inefficient things like the subsidy. It's clearly not working, and is a very wasteful scheme. So government should take it out channel this investment into healthcare. Let people be able to access healthcare when they're sick. Channel this investment into good educational system. Address the concerns of ASU. Have primary healthcare for everybody. Have primary schools, and reduce or at least eliminate the number of out of school children. And I think this is an area that ICAN as a professional body can add impact. We have the resources, to be able to provide this level of support and thought process to government.
Thank you, Mr. Ayo Akinduite. We cannot thank you enough. It's as if this oil of a thing borders on every facet of life as a Nigerian. And if anything touches the oil, it's as if it has a multiplier effect on every other thing in this country. Thank you so much for coming to ICAN on Air this time around as we close the year 2022. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your wealth of knowledge you've shared with our audience across the globe. And I hope when next we call on you, you will be willing to grant us audience and to come on ICAN on Air once again.
Thank you very much, and
wish
you a happy new year, and see you in
Thank you. Our global audience, this is saying Merry Christmas to everyone and Happy New Year in advance. The last episode will be coming up on Thursday, the 29th of December. You don't want to miss it. It will be a kind of get-together of all we've done since the year started. All the speakers who had really improved, who have spoken to you and inspired you, will bring them back. And also, it will be a time to celebrate everyone who had been part of this since we started in January. We are grateful for everybody, and we're grateful to God for keeping us and making us to see to this time. So we want to say us again, come Thursday 29th, December 2022, as we celebrate and in anticipation for greater show come 2023. Thank you and see you on Thursday. Bye for now.
Yeah, bye.